Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be chatting through some books that I have changed my mind on. So I did a similar video last year when I first started my channel, chatting through some books where my opinions have sort of shifted. Now these aren't like big changes. It's not like when I read the book I gave it 2 stars and now I'm giving it 4 stars. No, these are more like just slight shifts in perception with regards to the book, and it's not saying that my thoughts previously weren't honest, because I always endeavour to be honest with my opinions. Well, like, there's no point in reviewing books if you're not being honest about your opinions, in my opinion. So this isn't that. This is more that a shifting in perception. So for some of these I have reread them and I've had a different experience upon my reread compared to when I first read them. And for some of these it is more to do with memorability. And for me, I generally I don't rate a book straight after reading it. I generally try and give it like at least overnight or a few days for me to fully settle on a rating. However, sometimes I feel like my opinions on books can really change as time goes on and how memorable I find the book. So for some of these it could be that I have increased the rating because I keep thinking about the book and the book has stayed with me. It has that longevity, and my brain just keeps going back to it again and again and again, and I feel like I have to give it a higher rating. And for some it could be the reverse of that, not necessarily to do with memorability, but more that I had a perception of the book when I read it, potentially due to hype or potentially due to my feelings that I really wanted to love a book. And then actually as time has gone on, I've realised that those weren't not my true feelings, but like my feelings about that book have changed. Change feels a bit dramatic, but like shifted. So I'll go through, maybe it will make more sense as I talk about each individual book. So I do have this video from last year, which I can link. It's one of my first videos, so I can link that for other books that I have shifted in opinions with. But these are some new ones that I've looked at. I looked at my Goodreads over the last year to see if there are any books that fitted into this criteria. We'll start off with the book that prompted me to have a look at these again, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is a book that I've only read this twice, so I recently reread this. My father read this book to me as a child. I can't remember what age, but as a young child my dad read this story to me not every night, but like it would be a regular evening occurrence that he would read a section of this. And we made it through, well, we did the whole of The Hobbit, we did the Fellowship of the Rings, but we never made it through the Two Towers. So I do definitely plan to get back to the Lord of the Rings. I originally thought I would do it this year, but I don't know if it will be this year, but that's a whole other thing. But I have recently reread The Hobbit. I was very nervous about my experience of rereading it because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. I don't know what I'm going to think about it reading it as an adult compared to reading it as a child. I don't have like loads and loads of memories of my childhood reading it. Like when I was going into this, I was like, I can't remember that much. But then as I read it, more and more things were coming back to me, and it was such a nostalgic experience. Like I listened to the Andy Serkis audiobook, which I would definitely recommend, but the experience of rereading it and the nostalgia, it had such an emotional impact on me rereading this. I was really surprised by how much rereading this affected me and that audiobook. And the majority of I did it just with the audiobook, but there was a moment towards the end where I was listening to the audiobook and I was reading the book alongside, and that's when it really hit me. I was like, oh, this book. So I don't know what I was thinking when I put this on Goodreads. I put it as 3 stars. I don't know, maybe I was in a bad mood that day, but upon reflection, upon my reread, I have put it at 4 stars. I don't know, I feel like in terms of like the nostalgia, it was a 5 stars, but I don't know, I found it a very hard book to rate, and a very hard book to think about, like there's no way you can be objective, but like I was like, I don't know how to rate this. So I put it as 4 stars. In some ways it's a 5 stars. But yes, this was definitely shifted up. My reread just completely elevated my opinions and reminded me how much I loved it, because maybe I've forgotten how much I really thoroughly enjoyed this because it had been so many years since I'd read it. But one that I shifted down is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. So when I read this back in December last year, I rated it 3 stars. I was very disappointed in it. And I think I put that in my review, and when I talked about it, I talked about how I was disappointed in this book and how I had I had my perceptions for it going in, having really enjoyed the first 2 books in the series. How I think actually I talked about the Poppy War in my I've changed my opinions video from last year, and how I shifted that from like a 4 to a 4.55 stars, whereas this one is in here for a more negative reason. And I think I gave this 3 stars when I read it. I think this had a higher rating, so I had a 3 stars because of my enjoyment of the rest of the series, and that I wasn't thinking about it critically in terms of just this book, because actually when I've reflected on it and when I've thought about it some more, thinking this was a 2-star book, there isn't much like enjoyment that has stuck with me from reading this book. That I am more and more annoyed with it as time has gone on. Like, I have the enjoyment for the rest of the series, absolutely. Books 1 and 2, absolutely. Those ones I really thoroughly enjoy, and I still have very positive thoughts when I think about them. But actually, I was rating this 3 stars because of my enjoyment of books 1 and 2, and not because of this book. And in terms of this book, my enjoyment was a lot lower, and I wasn't very pleased with not necessarily the direction of this. I feel like this is a bit like Game of Thrones season 8, where I didn't mind where it got to, I just didn't like the journey. So, and for me, the journey is very important. Like, the journey to get to the end needs to, like, sometimes that's more important than the actual ending. Like, this has to be the best bit. Like, it's the majority of the book. So yeah, I didn't mind where we got to, I just didn't like the journey to get there. So 2 stars down. Another negative is Serpent and Dove, and this was, I think I was just very overly positive, or when I first read it. I reread this earlier this year, and when I first read it I gave it 5 stars, and I have since given it 4 stars. Absolutely, this is a very fun and enjoyable read. I think I was just very overly enthusiastic with that 5 stars. Like, absolutely, I have found this series enjoyable. I haven't read the 2nd and 3rd book yet, but this first book I found very enjoyable. It's fun, it's very fun. But upon reread, it wasn't a 5 star. It was just a fun 4 star. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it was like dramatically worse or just anything like that. I just didn't have that 5-star feeling when I reread it, and so I couldn't keep it at 5 stars. I had to lower the rating to 4 stars because, yeah, that's how I felt when I reread it, that it didn't quite merit the 5 stars that I originally gave it. I have the 2nd book to read, and I am nervous to read it because I have generally heard quite negative reviews for that. So I am nervous to continue this series. I definitely want to finish it before the end of the year, but I am nervous because of how negative the reviews have been for that 2nd book. Oh, I realised that I actually have more negatives here than positives. I'm not evenly spread. I've got there's 6 books total, and I've realised that 4 of them are negatives and 2 of them are positives. So we'll do one more negative before we go back to the positives. So another negative is Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. So originally when I read this, I gave it 3 stars, but actually I think it's more of a 2 stars, unfortunately. So my reasoning with this one, I have generally liked Leigh Bardugo's books. I generally liked the Grishaverse. I read Shadow and Bone many years, I think like 2014 I read the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And then I read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom as and when they were published. Since then I've read everything as and when it's been published. Ninth House has been my favourite book by Leigh Bardugo, and I desperately would like more books in that series. So when King of Scars came out, I mean, I've been reading these books for years. I've only ever read her books once, that I haven't ever reread any of her books, and I went into King of Scars probably with not like the clearest memories of the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And the same when I read Rule of Wolves, that I didn't reread anything. I read a synopsis or like a recap of King of Scars, but I did just find that it felt a bit like a money grab. That whole series, that she knew the characters that it was based off, she knew were favourites from the other 2 series, and so by adding this duology on, it just felt like it didn't feel necessary. I think it didn't feel necessary, and I think that she has written much better books, and that however much and the things, I've always enjoyed the Grishaverse, but it's never been like a favourite series. I think it's had its time, and it's had its time for me. Like, I don't think I want to be reading any more Grisha books anymore. I don't know. I want more Ninth House. That's what I want more Ninth House. But Rule of Wolves, it felt messy to me. I think there are lots of elements within the plot that I liked, and there's lots of like tropes that I like, and the characters I like. There's lots of aspects that I like, and I think you can see how she really has developed as a writer over the course of all these books that she has published. You can really see how she has grown as an author. However, that book felt really messy to me, and it just felt a bit like jumbled together in terms of the plot. I think I was being nice with giving it 3 stars. I was being a bit overly generous. So I've since decided to lower my rating to 2 stars. The thing is, when I'm lowering these ratings, it's because I don't have any like fond memories. Like when I think back to my reading experience, and when I think back to it, the things that are staying with me are the negatives. They're not the positives, and it's the negatives that have the longevity compared to those elements of positivity. So that's another reason for lowering it. Right, positivity. So a book that I have increased the rating for is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. So I read this back in May. I picked it up on a whim after reading the first sentence, which was, I lost an arm on my last trip home, my left arm. And I was like, I'm intrigued. So I was intrigued straight away and picked this up and read it straight away. And I gave this 4 stars originally, but this book has stuck with me. Like I think about this book all of the time I think about this book. So I have increased the rating to 5 stars just because of how much I think about it, and how much I mull over the ideas that are explored in here, and how much I think about wanting to read more Octavia E. Butler since reading this. And so just the ideas in this, and the way that it was written, and just everything about this, I think about it. I really do think about it. And so because of that, and because of how much I think about it, I'm like, well, it can't be a 4 stars anymore because of the longevity, and because of how much you have got out of this story, and how much the experience of reading the story has stuck with you. So yeah, that is my reasoning for increasing my rating for Kindred. It's definitely one of the surprises of the year. Like, I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, and I really do hope that I have very similar experiences with other Octavia E. Butler books, that the other ones that I choose to pick up have the same experience with me, or that I go in and instantly love them. But like, and it's hard to say that I enjoyed this book because it's to do with the slave trade, and so it's not exactly an enjoyable experience to read about. That it was a tricky read, despite how short it is, but the ideas of it and the way that these thoughts have like stayed with me, that is why I've increased it. And then the final one, I feel a bit bad ending with negativity, is The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which originally I gave 3 stars, but I am now lowering my rating to 2 stars. So when this came out in April, I was so excited for it. I was hyped. And the hype was both something that I had built up in my head by myself and by the world as well, like other people around me. I think I was just very hyped to read this book. I thoroughly enjoyed From Blood and Ash and A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. I loved those books. I read them last year. I found them so fun. I actually have a review, well, not really a review, a gush up of them, because I loved the mixture between the fantasy and the romance, and just the twists and the turns, and I was just hooked. I was hooked. And then I was anticipating this coming out in April, and it came out, and I was disappointed. I would say that the first 90 pages, 100 pages are really good, and the last maybe 150 pages are really good, and then the middle is a big slog. And I think what's happened is that this needs an editor. It's that I believe originally this was going to be a 4-book series, and now it's a 6-book series with also like a spin-off companion series that's essential reading, and I think it's just got too big. It didn't need to be this big and this long. It really didn't. It should have just stuck with being 4 books, because this was just filler. There was so much filler, unnecessary filler. And the thing is, I wanted to love it, and I feel like that wanting to love it and this hype and this idea of this book that I built up in my head made me give it 3 stars, because I was like, because I wanted it to be a 5-star book, because I wanted it to be really, really good, because I had these perceptions that I was going to love it. And because of these perceptions, I was a bit, not blinded, because I think when I talked about it, I talked about how it had the slog and how I was disappointed in it. But actually, I was being a bit generous when I gave it 3 stars, because this middle slog was a big slog and it really did need editing. And as time has gone on, it's made me go, I don't know what I want to do with this series anymore, because of this book, because of how much I love books 1 and 2 and how disappointed I was in this, and how now I'm like, what do I do with this series? Because I had these perceptions of the first 2 books which I really thoroughly enjoyed, and now do I even want to finish the series because of where I am with this, and the fear that the rest of the series is going to be like this one, with this big slog in the middle, which it just needed editing. It really needed editing. And what I fear as well is that this series has got a lot of hype now. It's got a lot of buzz on BookTube, and I fear that because of all the positive reviews, maybe there's going to be less editing and less, I don't know. I don't know what her writing process is like, but it just felt a bit, I don't know, not churned out, but I don't even know. So I know that there's like a spin-off book coming out in October, and I'm thinking I'm not going to read it. Like, well, I might read it, but I'm not going to read it straight away. Now I'm thinking I will just wait until the rest of the series is all out, and if I choose to, I will binge the whole series as and when it is all out, as opposed to reading each book on publication, because of how, disappointed I was with this, and how as time has gone on, I realise how disappointed I am in you. Like, why did you have to be such a disappointment? Those are some books that I have changed my ratings on, or my thoughts have slightly shifted. Let me know if you change your ratings on books, whether that's upon reread, you reread it and you change your ratings, or that over time the memorability and longevity of your thoughts on a book change and shift slightly, and so you adjust your ratings. Let me know if that happens to you, or if you've ever like had an experience with a book where you have gone from really, really loving it to hating it, or from hating it to loving it. I don't know. Like, I just find it very interesting how our thoughts on books can change and shift as we grow and age. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!